All right, it looks like we are live. Hello, folks, and welcome to episode 1 of pairing with Mike Rizzi on his app Song Themes. And so this is Mike's first time pairing on a stream. So
Is it? Didn't we
I think so.
do it from my kitchen? No, my dining room once, like years ago.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yes. So this is the first time we've done it remotely, perhaps.
Right,
Then.
definitely remotely.
But that's right. I totally forgot that. Yes, I came over to your house and we did some streaming from there. Back in the
Yeah.
days when I could stream from my laptop, which I don't do anymore. Although now I could because I've got a wonderful M2 Max laptop that could totally handle this. Probably better than my current iMac, but anyway. So since probably most people weren't there when you were last here, do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. My name is Mike Rizzi, software engineer, lean agile coach, freelancer, radio DJ. There's the nickel.
And that last one is the important one for this topic, right?
Yeah. I've been a DJ in community radio stations, a music DJ, since my undergraduate days back east, and I still do it, even though I'm an old blue-haired fart. So yeah, one of the things I have kept over the years is, and of course, while I may be organized in some ways, but some of us, a lot of software engineers are organized people. I'm definitely the shoemaker when it comes to notes, as far as
Right.
So for doing radio shows, I often come up with I want to do a theme, like if it's July 4th or if it's Halloween, or I want to do a show on vampires or something on questioning patriotism, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're all in literally handwritten notes, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets. It's just all over creation. And during the pandemic, I started slowly consolidating them into a spreadsheet to keep track of the themes. But even that's not particularly well structured. And I was like, this would be kind of fun to share with the world, because there aren't many song themes websites out there, at least not ones that are full of commercials and are hard to navigate and are trying to get money from you. I'm thinking definitely along the line of simple app. I don't know, simple. I guess that comes from Agile. So
yeah, and I think I'm such a big fan of bespoke apps, right? Basically, apps. We have the ability as software engineers to write these things. And like you're alluding to, is sometimes we don't write stuff for ourselves that would really help. And spreadsheets, you can take them a long way, right? For better or for worse, large parts of our world run on spreadsheets. But the other thing is that I don't know about you, but less and less, I'm less and less trusting of apps on the web, because you never know when they're going to disappear. Unless they are, especially if they're either a Google app, because then it's going to disappear, or venture capital backed, where how are they making their money? Are they profitable? And so, even putting the customization, making something really bespoke and fit for exactly what you need, there's also there's a lot of apps that I might use, but it's is this going to be around for a while? I was using this app for what's called history search, and and it's really great, but they're shutting down. And this seems to happen on on a monthly basis. So I'm all for, as much work as it can be to build it. Like my Ensembler app, I could probably have cobbled stuff together with other apps, but I don't know. I like building stuff, but I also like the fact that I don't have to be beholden to some venture capital who decides, no, we need to
pivot.
We need to pivot, or we've run out of money, or we're going to change the UI of something in a way that you really hate. That doesn't happen often. So
It's funny
yeah.
when you were talking about apps that have changed. Just like a couple weeks ago, we were talking about the Every Noise at Once website. I think I was showing it to you, and you can probably remember that. So I went to load it up yesterday, and there's this big thing saying, "This is now an archival copy, a snapshot of the website," because I just got laid off from Spotify 2 days ago, and this is he was somehow pulling. He was the music taxonomist for Spotify,
Oh
and so
wow.
he was pulling this data from Spotify's stuff. If people know what I'm talking about, maybe I should share.
Yeah,
I
why
sharing?
don't you share?
Okay, actually,
I'll just say hi to folks. Hey, Sweetie. And Dude Man, welcome.
cool.
Demereg. Oh, yay, welcome. Hey, Beltalota. Nice to see you. Been a while. And Lexlers.
Wow, look at all those people.
And Xproof. The short answer to your question: do I use my do I use var? No. That's the short answer. The long answer is it depends, but mostly
So,
no.
do I need to do anything? I think
Nope.
I've shared, but
There we
okay.
go.
Yeah, so this is Every Noise at Once, and it's every style or genre of music you can imagine, or at least as categorized by Spotify. And so,
You
dark
might need to
psytrance.
zoom in so that
Yeah, let me
folks
do
can see
some
because it's
zooming.
pretty.
Was it Control Shift?
Plus.
Let me try that one.
There you go.
Yeah, I was thinking about the StreamYard. So like, hard industrial techno, vegan remix, freeform hardcore. I mean, I'm gonna scroll down. Look at how many styles
Oh
of
my God.
music there are. What's kind of beautiful about this site though is if you're like, oh, what is rockabilly? Well, that one's not so. What does New England metal sound like? You can click on this and it gives you an example of bands of that style. And then there's also a way to play it, which I forget how to do at the moment. That may be disabled.
I don't think I've heard of any of those bands, and I'm a metal fan, so
Yeah,
that's great. Yeah.
but it's just more of an example of a
Yeah.
website that was really fun, and you could go down the rabbit hole in it. And yet, it's now looks like I've lost control of the computer.
Hey, Paige. Nice to see you. Yeah.
Let me try this.
I have another one of these red hats. I should give it to Mike. Oh, Sweetie, thank you for the Prime Gaming subscription. Appreciate that. Yeah, I haven't heard of. I doubt many people have heard of most of these. German jazz rap. That's got to be interesting.
Well, you can tell that he just got, because the app is now hung on my machine at least.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'll just close it. But you get the idea. Here's a cool resource that somebody built as a labor of love. And
well, I would hope they open. I mean, if it's just if it's a taxonomy, I mean, maybe it can't be maintained, but certainly could open source the taxonomy itself. I would hope that's
But I think
possible.
Spotify owns it. He was tapping.
Oh, really?
He was an employee of Spotify.
Oh, so is it just
and he was
getting a
pulling the
feed
data.
from? Oh,
yeah.
Oh, that stinks. Well, yeah.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
But yeah, he's trying to figure something out. I was reading his blog yesterday, so
yeah. Oh, Kuros, thank you also for your subscription. Appreciate that. So, one of the things that Mike and I have been doing is because Mike said, "Hey, let's work on this app," and so we used it as an opportunity to work on some things that we've been both learning from our a book club. So I run a book club every Sunday. We spend a couple of hours, a bunch of us on Zoom, talking about the book, trying to understand it better, whatever that book might be. The current book we're reading is Learning Domain-Driven Design by Vlad Kononov, and it's been an interesting time because it's been a larger group than we've generally had, and so that's been really good. And so one of the things that the book talks about, and if you're into domain-driven design, you may be aware of event storming. And so we basically started by event storming this application. Do you want do you want to walk through the event storming, or do you want me to do that?
Either way, I don't mind starting, and then you can
Okay.
jump in.
So let's
correct.
share it. There we go. And you'll probably want to zoom in quite a bit.
Yeah.
Actually, why
So
don't you zoom out
zoom out.
to give
Yeah.
people a sense of what's what.
My ability to navigate is a little bit slow.
That's all right.
So yeah, we've got, this was built from a template that Ted found, and that template was provided these step 1, 2, 3, 4 approaches. And so I'm going to zoom in on the legend on the left here. And this was sort of the different stickies we're using and the colors and what they meant. So it gives you an idea of, you know, what colors we chose was based on this. And in the upper corner, I guess I should go through the process more than explaining the board. That'll come
Yeah.
out.
Do you want to talk about the process, or do you want me to talk
Yeah.
about it?
Why don't you talk about the process, and then
Okay.
you can
Yeah.
tell
So
me
so
to
the
zoom and say the word.
idea of event storming is if you're doing domain-driven design, at some point you need to figure out sort of do business analysis, discovery. Um, storming isn't the only technique, but it is a popular technique. And one of the things that it does, and I'll switch to my screen so I can
Makes sense.
navigate here. So one of by the name you could probably tell, one of the things you start with is domain events. So I don't have a link I can share. Shoot, I'll find that in a bit, because I actually do have a copy of this that I could share. I can't share this one because this one is we're editing, but I will share a link that we can look at. But the idea of event storming is you basically start with events, stuff that happened that's significant, important, wanted to be known and be aware of by the business. And so domain is the important thing in domain-driven design. And so domain event is something that the business recognizes as happening. So an example that you typically hear is item added to shopping cart, order paid, order shipped, order returned, right? All these kinds of things that the business cares about. Those are sort of high level ones, but it could be lower level ones, such as item added to shopping cart, item removed from shopping cart, a different item added to shopping cart, another item added to shopping cart. And so the idea is, you know, you can use this to figure out your business process. And there's an entire book on this. Alberto Brandolini is the one who basically invented the process, and it is mainly done with sort of in a large room, whether virtual or real, with the business people in the room, because you want to talk to them about the significant events. Oh, thanks, 3G. And so you pretty much start with domain events, like what are the things want to happen? Then you can sort of backtrack from there, or you can move forward. But it's very much you're just sort of doing a brain dump, brainstorming of the events, and then you start backing up. And one of the things that the book talks about is this sort of the answer to everything, or the thing that covers everything, are all of these pieces. And so it's a semi-standard, maybe not semi-standard, there's sort of a standard color for these things based on post-it notes that were used by Alberto. So orange is the domain events, commands are blue, read models or queries are green, actors are yellow, and then what are called policies is sort of this more purplish, and the system is pink. Some of these change colors a bit depending on the system you're using. And there's this flow through the system is, so something in the real world causes some actor to issue a command that results in some event. Right. So I'm looking at a page, I see, oh, I want that. I click a button to add to the cart. That's the command. So add to cart, and then item added to cart is the event that would update a read model because you've added it. So now if you look at your shopping cart, you should see that item in the shopping cart. And there's a whole bunch of other things, but that's sort of the high level process. Highly recommend reading about it if you're not familiar with it. And so as I mentioned, there's sort of 3 levels, sort of the big picture where we're gathering events. And then we get to the point where we get to the design level where pretty much the business folks are probably not in the room because you're discussing aggregates. And so this template that I got for better or for worse sort of goes a bit through those 3 levels. It was a bit confusing, but we'll talk about that. All right, that was my rambling introduction.
No, it's good. I was trying to post to the chat. I got one thing in, but everything else failed to post. I was sending a link to the event storming website and the Lean Pub, but alas. So I guess one of the things, I don't know where you wanted to go next with this, Ted, but should I explain what the app is at a high
Yes,
level?
I was going to suggest let's talk about the app, and I'll switch over to you.
Sure, let me get my face out of that screen. So the idea, actually, I'm just going to talk and not use anything on the screen at first. So the idea is, like I said earlier, I have song themes, right? So basically, it's a single song. It could be a song that's about vampires, but it also could be under the theme Halloween. So for each song, it could have multiple themes. Meanwhile, you could actually have multiple different artists doing that same song, right? So there's definitely a many-to-many going on. So in some ways, it seems like, oh, this is like a really silly, easy app to do. Why would we do this with DDD and get all hardcore about it? And it's true. At first, I was like, well, let's just give it a roll and see what happens. But as with anything in software engineering, I don't know about y'all, but whenever I start work on something, and whenever I say the word just either out loud or to my own self, it's usually an indication that it's more than just.
Yes.
And so, so some of the high level ideas we had were, okay, at the simplest level, somebody could go to the website and they could type in a single theme, and then I would give them a list of all the songs with that theme. Or they could type in multiple themes, right? And we could give the list of songs with that theme. Then so that's sort of the simplest scenario you could think of. But then like, well, how do we get songs in? Do I, Mike Rizzi, as administrator, just dump them into a database? Or do I have a way of entering them, like either doing bulk entry or one at a time? And what if I want to start letting other folks, enter stuff? And do I want to let them just blindly enter them, or do I want to consider them contributors such that I, as the admin, approve or disapprove them, right? Like, yeah, that's a bit of a stretch, or no, great, thanks, added. So we started sketching out these yellow stickies, which was high level stories. And actually, I should backtrack. So that's the high level of what we could do. We got contributors and so forth. We started with domain events,
right,
at first, and was like, we got stuck really fast. Like, what are the domain events?
right.
So I don't know about you, Ted, but I feel like we got to the point where it's like, I feel like we're missing a step here, like understanding our domain a little bit better, even though I knew it in my head. So we started sketching out like high level stories, like, I don't know. Contributor submits a song theme, right? Admin approves a song theme update.
Right.
Or submits a song theme edit or correction. But the easiest ones, I don't even know if they're even in order of easiest. Yeah, visitor searches for songs with one theme, right? That's just a visitor is somebody that's not logged in; they're just at the website.
Yeah, so I think one of the things we realized, which may be so obvious that it wasn't worth mentioning in the event storming book or resources, is that you already need to have the business process in mind. basically you have to have a good you clearly can't come up with an event of song added unless you understand, well, how do songs get added, and how do contributors contribute songs, and how do we correct songs, and how do we do things like that. And then so that's why, as Mike said, it's like we had to sort of back up. We were having trouble coming up with the events because we didn't have a clear understanding of what the thing did, really. I mean, we had a general idea, but like you got to get to the point where it's like, okay, really, what does it do? So that's when we came up and started basically creating stories.
And so once we did that, the next step was, okay, let's figure out what the events are. The little green diamonds were us going, hey, have we
Did we
created
cover
all the
that?
events
Yeah.
for that story? So to make sure we sort of didn't, sort of like a check mark, make sure we got them all covered. And then the first step.
Yeah, so Suiji asks, I suppose somebody's already doing some things manually or has an actual problem to be solved. And yes, so clearly Mike had that in mind, but when it's in your mind, it's pretty ambiguous until you get to the point like, oh, okay, really, what does it look like? What does it need to do? And I think, uh, I think, Mike, you'd probably agree that this app is pretty basic in
Thin, yeah.
it's pretty thin in terms of like a business process, which is how event storming is like. When they talk about event storming, they talk about hundreds of these stickies, of these event stickies, where it's clearly you're working on some kind of complex thing. This not so much. Like actually, most of the complexity, or at least a fair amount of the complexity, is around the contributors and invites, and not just if it's just you adding songs and searching. There's like, oh, there's not much there.
And then there's other ideas that I came up with the last few days, Ted. Like one was like a suggestion engine, for lack of a better word. So if somebody types in, they want themes about summer, it could say, well, do you also want songs about heat or sweating or fire, or getting a little bit extreme on the fire and so forth. So, or if you're doing it searching for the word fire, themes of the fire, are you doing it because of there's a fire 100 miles north of where you are, or is it because it's just a hot day?
Right.
You wanted to have something.
Right.
So, but it could get complicated pretty quickly, I'm realizing. Yeah. But this initial version, yes. Yeah. And business logic, you're right, is pretty thin.
Yeah.
It's mostly
but I think we found as we sort of got the stories and started getting into it, it brought up some really interesting stuff. Mm-hmm. So Xproof asks, what's a domain? So domain is a problem to be solved. So often we talk about business logic, but not all logic is directly associated with business per se. There may be support things, or maybe things that aren't business but are other. So generally the word domain is used. If you have not read Learning Domain-Driven Design or any domain-driven design book, the term domain is actually quite subtle, nuanced. But at a high level, it's like, why are you building this thing? What's the problem you're trying to solve? And so for this one, the problem we're trying to solve is want to be able to find songs with a theme. But really the problem is managing that, not, basically how do you add them and find them and update them and correct them and allow other people to correct them and add to them. So, but all under the I want to be able to find a song with this theme or these themes. But all the terms around subdomains and generic subdomains and core subdomains and all that stuff, that I will just defer to the book, because you'll want to get and it's often confused with bounded context, but we'll probably get into some of that.
Do we want to skip over or just go over each of these quickly, the different steps?
Yeah, I think maybe just go over the first step and say. So
this first one was just a blurt of events, right, that we could come up with. They weren't necessarily in a timeline. They were just like as we could think of them based on the stories. The next one was this one timeline? Yeah, this one was timeline-ish. Step 2, sort of timeline, but also kind of affinity grouping. So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you add a song's modified, somebody wants to update a song, or it's accepted or rejected. So it's sort of grouping. And then if you want to, so one of the things we didn't talk about was we want the idea of, at first, I'm going to invite people to be contributors to the site. Like it just won't be open to the world at
right,
first.
right,
Kind of like the way TED does invite for things like the Ensembler and so forth. So we would have the idea of me sending an invite out and the person getting that contributor role, letting them be notified. So it'll be interesting because we'll be tapping into, sending emails, and because that's the notification system we
right.
originally settled on.
Yeah.
Um,
So endo functor 0 asks, do you
oh,
include actors in the first step? And so the idea is no, you don't introduce those until later. The bulk of the early work is just finding the events, and then maybe grouping them together, and then we'll see the next step is starting to put them in some kind of order of occurrence.
right. So yeah, and then contribution submitted, approved, and rejected. So that's that. So here's where we start getting into actors to
Right.
answer endo functor 0. And
Right.
normally we don't keep copies of like the
Right.
step 1, 2, 3, 4. We kind of did it for y'all's so you could see how we did it. But normally you do this in a room with stickies on a wall. And so you're
Right.
just literally
And you're
moving stickies around.
exactly. And for a mirror board, you would be doing the same thing, because otherwise you get into the problem of, wait, did we cover that one?
Right.
Because we were copying around. It's like, wait, and that's why we put the little green things. It's like, did we
Right.
copy this one? Did we put it in the right place? Yeah.
Yeah. So we learned.
Yeah.
We know you're not supposed to reuse them, but we learned it's
Yeah.
actually makes it more complicated. So don't copy and paste your board.
Yeah. So in this template, step 3 is called track causes. So now you have the events. They're kind of in some kind of sequence, maybe grouped together. And now you're basically trying to find out, well, okay, these events happened. How? Why? What caused them to happen? And generally, you're going to backtrack all the way to, at some point, to an actor. In our case, I think almost all the actors are actual users, but that's not always true in a larger system. Could be another system that is the actor, that is calling an API of some sort.
And so just as you can see, actors are yellow, external systems pinkish, command is blue, and the view read model is green. And the flow is usually, or not usually, it's always, a command always generates an event.
Right.
So you always see blue, orange as a pair.
Right. And so when you're trying to figure it out and you see an event called song added, it's pretty likely there's a command called add song. And if you see one called song modified, it's pretty likely there's a command called modify song. So that works out really well. Do you want to mention the problem we had with queries and UIs? Or do you want me to talk about it?
Right, we did struggle with that. I'm trying to remember specifically what it was we struggled with it. So why don't you run with it?
Yeah, so the way that event storming is supposed to happen is after you've got the events and you sort of, affinity group them and then put them into, some kind of order, right? So invite sent is going to lead to one of two possibilities. Either it's accepted or expired. We didn't have a case for somebody for just rejecting the invite. We figure if you don't want that invite, or maybe you didn't see it, it's probably going to expire. But if it was accepted, then a role is going to be assigned and the contributor is going to be notified. So once you get those, when one of the things we struggled with, and I think we struggled with it actually at the really just right up front when we're trying to figure out the events, is this doesn't work well when the sort of the writes, the modifications to the system are a small part of the system, or like the main thing that you do with this system is find stuff, right? Queries. Those aren't events. So we actually initially put those in as events because I think I came across somewhere as being maybe something to do. But an event is a state change by definition. And so we had this theme query submitted here. That's not really an event. We kind of put it there because we're like, well, it's part of what the system does. But it turns out that's not really an event, because an event is a state change. And theme query submitted, yes, maybe at some point there is maybe a record created somewhere or some piece of information created to handle the query. But from a business process from a domain process standpoint, in a sense, it doesn't exist. Yeah, so we had like theme query submitted and theme query refined, but it turns out those don't make any sense. So when we finally got down to the track causes, that's when we basically pulled in this white sticky, which is about the UI, and then that's where it came in. So one thing I certainly realized is event storming is great for the sort of internal processes, but it's not going to help you sort of design the UI flow. It's not meant for that, and that's what I know I was certainly missing.
Me too.
So Suiji mentioned, so we're missing read models in a process to backtrack. Yeah, so the read models don't come in until later, right? So when you're doing the track causes, how did a song get added? Well, you had a command add song. Well, before even that, you probably had something that was a read model. If here's all the songs we've got, do you want to add one? Maybe. Or maybe it's just an empty form and there's not much there. There's not really much of a read model. But we did introduce, for example, for modify song, you got to find the existing one. And so that requires a read model. So that there is a bit of flavor of sort of CQRS, command query responsibility segregation, that sort of read is separate from writes. So this sort of built into I think this way of thinking, but doesn't mean you have to implement it that way. Yeah, so I noticed in the chat talking about the book. So there's obviously the Blue Book, Eric Evans's book. That's a much deeper, more conceptual, a bit harder to read and understand. Vlad Kononov's, I think, is a more lightweight, higher level, less depth, but probably better introduction to domain-driven design. And it's obviously more modern because it was written recently as opposed to 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think the that book was a little bit more of a gateway drug book, right? Once you get the light, it's like, okay, now I want to dig deeper.
Right. Yeah, eventually you're going to want to read the Blue Book. Yeah, I think, but that's me. So do you want to walk through us the track causes stuff?
Track causes.
So what?
Oh, that's the name of this step 3.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the name.
I'm like, what is track causes? I'm like thinking like a song is like a track, right? Some people refer to songs.
That's funny. There's a ubiquitous language problem. What do we mean by track?
Yeah.
Oh,
well, actually, let's look at the ubiquitous language.
Perfect.
So I'm going to zoom out and then move back over to here. Nope. Grabby. So a big part of
so before you
BDD,
get to that,
oh sure, fire away.
Lexler's asked a question. Did you find value in Kononov's book? Since we actually in the book club, at least some of us read both Evans's book and Vernon Vaughn's red book, Implementing Domain-Driven Design. Was this one useful? I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I didn't read the blue book, but I did read the. I missed the book club for the blue one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I did, but I did. I found there was definitely some aha moments from this book. I think it's because he writes in a simpler, less academic way.
Mhm.
So it's sort of like, oh, yes. There's a few things that I found confusing with this book. Um, I keep calling it this book because I'm blanking on the author's name in front of me. What do I have the book?
Kononov. We'll
Kononov.
just, yeah.
Um, but I think, to me, I think that book has helped solidify things for me,
Mhm.
as far as, so yeah, it'd be interesting to see what did Lexer say?
Well, she didn't join us for the current book, but she was there for the other ones. So
Okay.
I clearly I've read multiple times the domain driven, the blue book and the red book. Um, but I think it's, it almost wouldn't have mattered what book it was to a certain extent. Um, Going over this stuff over and over again, especially in a group, and talking about it and bringing up sort of not edge cases, but sort of where our knowledge gets fuzzy. Because over time, my knowledge of like what is an aggregate, uh, every time I talk about it or we read something about it, it becomes much more clear. And even now that we're doing event sourcing in our ensemble, it's even becoming much more clear. And so I think, especially for these kinds of things, you almost, I don't know, it feels like you almost can't talk about it and discuss it too much, because I found that I'm still learning different aspects of it. And also, since it's a more current book, Kononov brings in some things like event storming, which I had done before. I'd taken a training where we did it, and it did. You do it once, and if you never do it again, or you do it rarely, it's not going to stick. And so that's kind of the other thing is unless you're doing this on a frequent basis, you forget stuff. And so, sort of talking about it again and discussing it again, uh, especially the things that I know I was less sure about, such as what's a subdomain and how does that relate to bounded contexts. There was some clarity that was there for me, but also I love talking about this stuff, so it almost doesn't matter. All right. So sorry. So now go ahead and let's look at our ubiquitous language.
Right.
You might want to zoom in a bit more.
Yeah. So for the folks who don't know what an ubiquitous language is, it's part of DDD, and the idea is you have common language that business and technical people use for the exact same thing, that you don't spend energy translating from the business world to the code world. In other words, it's ubiquitous. And whenever you find a term that has multiple meanings, like track, which actually isn't the case in our ubiquitous language, because we don't even talk about tracks
Right. We talk
at
about
all.
song.
We talk about songs.
Yeah.
But if you have two different definitions, that might be a hint that you need to split into this thing called the bounded context,
Right.
which we won't go into. But
Right. Or if you kept talking about track and I kept talking about song and we meant the same thing, that would be a place where we'd say, okay, we're both using different terms for the same thing. Which one do we want? And
right,
of course, I would
and
defer to
settle on it.
you. Yeah.
Exactly. So these are the ones we came up with. We grouped them by actors, nouns, and verbs. So the first actor is just anyone. Anybody can do anything. Or anything, any of the actors below. So a user is known to the site. In other words, they have a user profile. They could be a contributor. They could be an administrator. They could be a member. In other words, somebody that doesn't contribute. But so one of the other ideas we talked about was it's a future functionality. But if you decide to become a member of the website, maybe we could do things like generate playlists for you, right? Put them into a spreadsheet, or just put it in a plain text file. Or I don't even know if Spotify has APIs, but can we create a Spotify playlist,
Yeah.
through APIs?
Right.
So that's, some things we could do for people that sign up, if you will.
Right.
Again, not to make money, just to give people functionality.
Right. Well, maybe make money.
Yeah. And then
don't be so quick to turn down money.
Yeah, true. Well, it's more the bad taste from all the different
I know.
song
But hey, we wouldn't
websites
have
that we do.
advertising and pop-ups and stuff like that.
Yeah, That's true. And like 10 pop-ups
Yeah,
hiding
right.
things.
But one thing I want to point out for all of these things is it was, it looks like it's just there and it just appears. The process was by no means right that straightforward. In fact, even now I'm rethinking, like, I'm not crazy about I'm never crazy about user because it feels like it's the lazy term.
Right.
Um, and so some of this was, can we refine the terms? We played around with some different terms, so stuff was changing around. And so this is especially during the discovery analysis process, and you're doing the event storming and you're using terminology. There's a lot of back and forth and things shifting, and getting it written down is so important because otherwise you'll fall back to whatever you were used to. And so it's it's still can change over time. You can come up with so the language here. So one thing I'm not sure Mike specified about ubiquitous language is it is for modeling, and what we're modeling is not the entire organization. You never do that. We used to do that. That doesn't work. And so one of the main things about domain-driven design is basically drawing a box around what we're talking about, and that is the bounded context. So the bounded context is literally saying, within the context of what we're going to be working on, we're going to define these terms. Maybe another part of the organization uses this word differently. They use contributor in a completely different way. But inside this box, right? And this is why, they say, models are wrong because they can't represent the world, but they're useful because they can represent a portion and view of that world that you care about. So within this bounded context here, these are the terms we're using.
And just to flesh that out a little bit more.
Yeah.
So for example, say there's two different parts of your organization, right? And so the bounded context for, say, the HR department, if you're doing software for the HR department, is different than the bounded context for the department that's doing shipping and product fulfillment, right? And they might have words that are the same, but mean different things in each bounded context,
Right.
Or mean the same thing in both, which is fine too.
To me, one of the fundamental pieces of domain-driven design is the ubiquitous language. So if you're doing ubiquitous language, you're already kind of doing stuff from domain-driven design. But I think defining a language and defining what things mean and defining that in a concrete way, even if you do nothing else, is going to be so important. So I was actually there was a post on LinkedIn talking about naming, and one of the things I find is you end up with really generic, not great names in your code when you don't have a ubiquitous language that clearly defines terms from the domain. Because then you're like, well, what do I call this thing? I'll call it a display manager. It's like, no, it's a song list, right? And you don't get good names unless you can get them from somewhere. Where you should be getting them is from the domain.
Pre-DDD, one of the things that I used to do, whenever I joined the team, I would start making my own glossary of terms, like immediately.
Yep.
And then if they didn't have a shared glossary, I would, if the company, the team had a wiki, I would immediately publish it to the wiki and go, hey, can we all like add to this or update it, or like, yo, Rizzi, that's wrong, right? And like, oh, good, that's good. Let's talk about it, right, and figure out what the differences are. So that's very valuable.
And resolve them.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than having to constantly translate what the business people are talking about to what's in the code and vice versa. And this is, and it's sometimes work, and you've got to get people on the same page. And you can, as a developer, you can reinforce it. You can say, do you mean contributor? Because they keep saying user. It's like, no, do you mean contributor? Or do you mean administrator? Like, and doing that after a while, unless the other person is really obstinate and uncaring about what you think, in which case you've got other issues, people will start to synchronize and converge around the language. If you start noticing that new people joined, whether it's business or developers, and the language has shifted, you can explore, right? Because language is living, both human languages and domain languages. They're living and they change over time. I mean, I just remember, like, because sometimes you may have two different things that, hey, these are both visitor. Well, now they mean two different things. We need to come up with a different word to disambiguate which one is which. Lexler mentions the user. Yes, there's a group of folks who think that, oh, it's like calling them drug users. I never thought that either. But I do think and I'm guilty of this myself. But it is a bit lazy to just call them users rather than who are they, what are they doing, what is their goal. Like, for example, here we might not call them users, we might call them searchers. They're searchers. They're searching for stuff. So if you can't figure it out, to me that's an indication that you haven't quite figured out why are they here? What are they doing? What is the problem they want to solve? So that was a nice tangent on the actors part.
Should I explain Calexer?
I don't think we need to go deep into that.
Another day.
Yeah. If and when we get to that, we can talk about it.
Yeah. So we talk enough about actors. Should we move over to nouns?
Yeah.
Okay. And again, some of these are still in flight, right?
Yeah.
It's as we're figuring it out.
Yeah.
So there's a song, there's a theme, and we're thinking of themes as kind of like tags, right? Metaphorical. Well, I don't know, metaphorically. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Future idea of having a playlist, which holds a list of songs, the results of your search, if you will. Song database that holds the list of songs.
Mm-hmm.
Proposed song. I think we changed that to candidate. I'll have to go look at our event storming. We have proposed songs, aka a submission, aka a contributed song. You can see it's easy to come up with 3 different names for this, just off the top of my head. And then obviously we didn't settle on correction, update, or change.
Yeah.
We might have. We'll have to go look at the events. And then there's the idea of an invitation, inviting someone to contribute. And then the concept of a user profile, their real or a pseudonym name, and an email. And that one's we'll need for basically registering someone for the site. And then some sort of concept of roles.
Yeah. So I'm just going to get this question out of the way, even though it's quite a bit of a tangent. So DTOs normally convert to domain objects. Yes. That's all I'll say.
Nailed it.
We're gonna to slightly longer answer. One of the main things you want to be doing, unless you are creating a pure CRUD app where you may as well just generate a front end from the database, which totally could work and might totally be sufficient for what the needs are. But if you're building an app that has a domain where you have to talk to business people to figure out what these terms and things are, and most importantly, so we see the verbs here, and I think this is where most people got object-oriented programming wrong. I was listening to a presentation on DDD, and they were saying, yeah, in OO, you're supposed to start with nouns. And it's like, that's not the way I learned it. But regardless, really what you want to start with is the verbs, because the verbs are the behavior. Everybody talks about behavior-driven development. Well, what is behavior? It's verbs. Search, fetch, change, find, assign, right? All these things are verbs, and the whole idea of OO is to be this idea of active doing things with behavior. And if you just talk about the things and not the behavior, you end up with anemic models that have no behavior in them, because, oh, I've got a song, it's got some data. I've got a playlist, it's got some data. I've got a profile, it's got some data. But I don't care about the data as much as I care about, what do I do with it? What does it do? What can I do? What is the behavior? So you want to have a domain model, right? And that's what this process is for. It's helping you to build and take it to the next step, which we'll see when we get to the aggregates, is what objects do we create? And that builds our domain model. And you want to be very much unconcerned with how do I store this in a database, or how do I display it on a screen? Because they're important, but they're not as important as the domain itself. So that was the longer answer to DTOs. But that is what we're trying to, right? I mean, it's really interesting because throughout my career, it's some of the hardest stuff that you do is figuring out how do you build an object model. And I think some of this stuff, especially combined with the stuff we'll look at, gives you a really good start. So back to you on verbs. If there's anything else.
I don't know. I mean, as Sugi, I'm not even sure how to pronounce Sugi.
Suigi, like Luigi
Suigi.
but with an S.
Suigi. Okay, like Luigi. A lot of these verbs still have multiple words, right? Like contribute, suggest, submit, modify, update, correct, right? Clearly, we need to settle on one.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is sort of an iterative process, right? As we were doing this work way over here, where we're tracking the causes, as we went from each step 1 to 2 to 3,
yes,
we were already starting to refine the names.
Yes.
And in some ways, we probably, a task for us is to go back and go, did we settle on names and update the UL,
right?
The ubiquitous language.
Right.
So that would be a remaining task for us.
Yep.
But as far as going back here, so you can contribute a song, you can modify a song, you can propose a change to a song. Administrator could approve. The song could be added. It could be assigned. A role could be assigned to a user, and you can invite someone. So these are the verbs we came up with so far.
Yep.
And like any language, it is living. Meaning it's.
Which means it's changing.
It's changing, yeah. Let's see. We were on step 3, right?
Yes.
Is there anything more we wanted to say about step 3, or go through more detail?
I think we can dive into detail of one of the
more interesting ones.
One of the more interesting ones.
You think this one because it's got branching?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that. Pick a branching.
Okay.
One,
pick a branching one. Yes.
Zoom in more on that one.
Yep.
Like really get it in there.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. So here the actor is looking at a song proposal. Sorry, the actor, the administrator, is looking at the song proposal view UI.
Sorry. Oh yeah, his comment was like, "To live is to change." Yes.
Yep.
Because if it stops changing, it's dead. Very true. Yes. Welcome to Philosophy 101.
I almost started to break out into that Monty Python song about philosophers, but I won't. So the administrator is looking at a song proposal view interface, a UI, and that is presenting the proposed songs. And the administrator is now going to take commands for each song and say, I accept this song proposal or I reject it. If it's accept, then 3 events get emitted. First is the song proposal is accepted event. Then the song is added event. And then a contributor is notified like, hey, we approved your song. Thank you.
Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. And then the other branch is, no, we're not going to accept that song. And so officially it's rejected event, but then there's also a notification to the contributor saying, we rejected it because while it seemed like it's about a hot summer, it's really about, hot steel coming out of the steel mill. It's not really, doesn't match the theme of hot summer, that kind of thing.
And I want to point out, like a lot of things in, I think, like, and I hesitate to use the word agile, so I'll use it in extreme programming, like stories and like cards and so on. They are tokens and stand-ins for conversations. And so This process is not just about let's put some stickies up and find out the events. It's in fact much more important. Like this artifact, right? What you end up with is useful, but it's much more important that you got people in the room to talk about this. So like what you just said is like, when we first put the events together, I wasn't even thinking about, well, if we're rejected, do we want to tell them why? And once we started going through now tracking causes and linking it to an actor and saying, oh, here's what happens, that's when you just start discovering, oh, maybe we want to tell them why. I think we can do that. It's not like, sorry, we rejected and we're not going to tell you because whatever. um, we'll tell you. uh, and then I don't know if it was here or at the next stage where we started thinking, is there a counter proposal? Like, well, you propose this, but I think actually it should be this. And so you start discovering these things. Now you may, you at some point you have to have a stopping function because otherwise you could probably go on forever. But this is what you want. You want this discussion to happen, uh, and to talk about it and to come to agreement.
Of course, I had to write down counter proposal before I forget.
Yeah. So Expert asks, what's the best way to learn about domain-driven design? Like anything, do it. Do it. So this process, it's not hard in the sense that there's nothing technically difficult about this part of the process. And this is the important part of domain-driven design, which is starting to figure out names of things and terminology. What are the things that happen? And then the next stage, we start getting into sort of the code design level things. But pick a project that's of personal value and do it. If you can do it with someone else, even better. That's ideal. Even if neither one of you have much experience, you'll be able to support each other. So the best way to learn is to read the book so you become familiar with it, and then do it on your own stuff. We're about at the hour break. Did you want to take a quick break?
Sure, that works for me.
Okay. So we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll look at um, the last stage, the last step, where we find the aggregates, and we'll talk about that, and then we'll start looking at what slices we'll start developing. Who knows? So stay
Okay,
tuned, and we'll be back. Uh, how much time we want?
5.
5 minutes. All right. See you in 5. So I'll wait for Mike to get back. Oh, there he is. Perfect timing.
I was trying to figure out how to get a icon or image for when I stop the cam
Oh,
in
yeah.
StreamYard.
I realized I have to do is so normally I use OBS and I've got all my screens set up for that. But we're using StreamYard mainly because it's way easier to bring in a guest. Uh, to, but it doesn't. But I haven't. But I realized I didn't have sort of a break screen because maybe they assume you don't take breaks. I don't know. They assume you're robots. And Sweetie mentioned, oh, add the chat, and it's like, yeah, why doesn't StreamYard support me putting the chat onto the screen? So there's some feature suggestions that I'll be making. All right. So before our break,
Oh, the
yes, I do have that link somewhere. Let's see.
we're both scrambling to try and find it.
Oh, I have it. I have the link. I just want to make sure it's actually still working because he moved some stuff around to his new site, Dig Deep Roots, and there it is. So I'll pop it into chat here. And for some reason, the link that I used to have didn't have a forwarding, so it was broken. In case people are curious what that is. That's that. I don't always do the individual steps, but it's useful to have this as a reference. Oh, does JB have the old link? I'll have to go there and see, and I'll mention it to JB.
I have the old image, which I kind of liked actually.
Yes.
If you show my screen,
yeah,
you can see it. I like it because it doesn't come across as steps like the existing one. Right here, it's more like a flow. Whereas the other one, because I don't know, it's just me, because it's square boxes and they're numbered 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, because they link to sort of reference to the articles. Although I do like his newer naming nonsense, which we started using in our ensemble, which is like applesauce and pants. I like pants. Yeah. Pants is great because it's short and somehow it's also amusing.
Right.
All right. So let's look at the what I thought was one of the most interesting stages or steps. Yes, Lexos, that's where pants came from. Is finding the aggregates. So I think it'd be useful to show the previous steps for a second.
One in particular, or just?
That's fine. So one thing that I hadn't really thought about and was never pointed out to me when I took a training on this. I won't mention who did the training, but it was really just not great. Commands generate events. And to me, that's something we encounter in event source, and we keep encountering in all these different contexts. And I think it's one of the most powerful ideas is that commands generate events. Although in reality, it's commands most likely generate events. They may not always generate events, or they may not generate the events you want. So like you try to say withdraw from account, right? That's the command. It might be you don't have enough money, and so account overdrawn or withdraw rejected, something like that. Hey, it's Java Grunt, aka Deshaun. Welcome. And so this idea of commands generate events, and then how this fits into the next process, to me was just such a big aha moment. So go ahead and jump to the next one.
Okay.
Unless you want me to just take over and talk. But...
Why don't you take it over and talk?
Okay. All right. So let me switch to my
I think
screen.
you'll verbalize the aha better.
So here we've got, let's say, proposed song. All right, so proposed song, the command is obviously proposed song. Since it's a proposal, it doesn't add a song yet, but it does create something. So there is state change. The song proposal is submitted. And what that led to, so the next step is you find the commands that generate events and you stick an aggregate in between. So that generates this. So proposed song and proposal submitted and admin notified of that. And so this stick an aggregate in between commands and events is magical to me, because it reinforces a couple of things. One is, well, who's doing that work? Where is that implemented? Okay, it's implemented in this aggregate. But more so, I'm blanking on what word I want to use, but basically sort of confirms this idea that aggregates are about change to data. And I had sort of had this idea before, but it didn't become as clear until we did this. And then when we did event sourcing, it was like, oh, exactly. If you're not modifying anything, you don't need aggregates. Aggregates are all about transactional boundaries. And sometimes when you talk about that, at least for me, it was like, okay, yes, that makes sense. But the idea that they're the ones that process commands and generate events, they are all about the state change. And that's why you have transactions. If you're not modifying anything, you don't need transactions. And so there's some things, and this just naturally led to all sorts of things, like why you have the read-write split in CQRS is you've got your aggregates, which are one view of the data oriented towards changing things. Behavior, because what is behavior? It's changing stuff. Behavior is the way you change stuff. What the stuff got changed is the outcome, right? So I propose a song, that changes some data, creates this song proposal thing. And as an outcome, we have some events that are generated. And you may have different views of the data. Like I might want to change certain aspects. And so your aggregates might be different. But this step from the previous one to this one was for me just so cool.
Especially when we get down to the role change stuff.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that?
No, we can stick. Are we going to finish with this one, or?
I wasn't going to say much more. I think it's fairly straightforward. So this process was, once we realized that, we basically, okay, what other song proposal related things were there where we had something that affected a proposal on the left, some command that did that, and something command on the right. And this led us to, I think we discovered we were missing some commands.
Right.
And so again, this iteration that you were talking about is like, oh, we're missing something. We got the propose. Did we have the accept? I don't remember if we had that. Yeah, we had the accept. And so we found that, and associated with that was the reject. So we basically grabbed these and moved them down to here. And so one of the things that's recommended, and I think we didn't quite do this, and that'll come up later, is don't name your aggregate first. Even though it's really tempting to do so, don't do that. Figure out what all the commands and events are, and maybe even figure out what all your commands and all your events and what your other aggregates are, and then you can start naming stuff.
And then we also have when the song is accepted, there's what is that called? An external policy, right?
Yes.
So once that arrow is coming from accepted in the second row of song proposal.
Yeah, it's kind of unclear because
that can be pulled down.
There we go.
Oh, even better. Yeah. So when it's accepted, so remember this is a song proposal aggregate, not the song. So then we have this idea of an external policy that DDD has, or sorry, Venstroming has the idea of an external policy. And that policy is now going to add the song by creating a song object. And then when it's added, then the aggregate will emit a song added event.
Right. And here it's really interesting because earlier we said all commands must be initiated by an actor. Here, the actor is a policy. In a sense, it's an automated actor. And it's basically saying, well, when this event happens, I execute this command. When a song proposal is accepted, I execute add song. However add song works, whatever it does, I don't care. That's not my problem. My sole purpose in life as this policy is accepted songs are added. Yes, and eventual consistency. Yes. And that's exactly true. There are two separate aggregates. There's a song and there's a song proposal. We don't know when that song will be added. Likely very quickly, but still not in the same transaction.
Yep.
And I wish there was, I know for me, eventual, when I was first learning it, it sounded like such a long period of time, but all it means is not in the same transaction, not like 10 years from now. And there's also external service here. So is there a policy here? Maybe, but basically it's like when we have these notifications, they just go out through email. And so that's so we can start seeing that there's this service that we're going to need to talk to.
And then one area I think we didn't really settle on, the next section, song change proposal. I think we did settle because it's very similar to song proposal. It's got the same symmetry.
Yes.
But it's similar but different.
Yes, it's similar in that it has, and I think this is where we noticed that there was something missing. This one has propose, which is basically a create, accept, which is basically process it, update it, and then reject is a different kind of update. And song change proposal is the same thing. You have a propose, accept, and reject, and so these are and we were thinking, oh, maybe there's some kind of base behavior of proposals that get proposed, accepted, and rejected, because they look very similar. The events are similar, and the automated policy is similar. They eventually talk to modify song, but they're all doing something with a song.
I think when we presented this to the book club, there was a question like, why not just make song proposal do both change and I don't remember what our answer was. I think it was the behavior is slightly different because they're talking to two different external commands.
Yeah, and I think we don't know. At least I don't know. Maybe they will be
we'll
the same
find out
thing.
as we're implementing.
Maybe they'll inherit some common behavior and or compose some behavior. Or I don't know. And I think that's something we will discover when we actually write the code. Yeah. One thing we noticed here is we weren't trying to be thorough, but we were thinking about this idea of conflicting proposals, which I think affects the change proposals much more than the new song proposals. You don't want to have two different contributors proposing changes to the same song sort of in flight. And so there might be some prerequisite of before you propose the change, you look to see if there's one already there, something like that. Should we talk about role change?
Yeah. Wow, this was a lot, huh? A lot of the complexity is around this, or at least from the domain perspective.
Yeah. And so here, what did we have first? We had role change. And then we were looking at sort of, well, what does role change do?
So, or was it? Yeah, it was role change.
Yeah. Yeah, it might have been something different. I don't know. but there's something similar about this idea of you create something and then you sort of process it. And so here, oh no, we had invite before. That was it.
That's right. It was called invite.
Yes. So this is the danger of creating the name too early. Is we started with events, invite person, contributor invited, invite person to become admin invited, accept invite, and all the stuff around invite. Oops. Which seemed to lead us to, oh, then this aggregate thing is called an invite. Except it's not. And this was one of those other aha moments. Like, we named it too soon because it seemed obvious that it was an invite. But
And what was it that made us switch to role change?
well, we're saying, what does it do? What happens as a result of these events? Contributor invited, admin invited. Really, that's about the invites. So that's sort of separate. But once we start to link it to, well, what happens when they accept is the roles were assigned.
Right.
And we're like, oh, but roles are like in this user profile thing, right? Because we had created user profile and user profile created as our events.
We originally had user roles in user profile.
And so we had user roles in here because that makes sense. You had a user profile, it has roles. That's the way I did it. That's the way we all do it, right? Well, then we had the problem of transactional consistency. The job of this invite was to change roles. And that was the aha moment. And we're like, well, wait, that means we have to have these things and we have to connect these events to a change over here.
Well, that's why we had the aha moment, because we were like, we have to change both aggregates at the same time. And the whole idea not the whole idea, but one of the important principles of DDD is an aggregate is transactional unto itself and should never be dependent on other aggregates transaction.
Right.
And that's where we're like, but they need each other.
Yeah.
And so I guess we could have built it that way.
Yeah.
It would have violated DDD.
Well, it wouldn't have necessarily violated. We could have done it where, and this at least was sort of my thought process is, okay, contributor role assigned is the event, and then we'll have some policy that runs separately that will go ahead and then update the user profile.
Yeah, eventually.
But when we were talking more about that, it was like, but why? Like, why do we want to have a separate object with that and have that in a separate transaction and have to figure out how to update that? Why not just put the thing we're changing in the aggregate that we're using to change stuff? And so that's when we realized, yes, technically this thing we're calling an event, but really its purpose was to do a role change. And so if we move user roles into this object, then we could do it all in one transaction and we don't have any inventional consistency. So we have very strong consistency here.
Yeah, that was a huge aha moment.
Yeah, that was huge, because one of the things we started going through is then, okay, well, what if the user roles were in this thing? What does that mean in terms of other stuff, like, you're trying to do something. How do we know what role you are? Well, we could easily read it. But the aggregate does not have, and this again goes back to the aggregate doesn't have to be the thing that you read. You can have multiple views, multiple read models of the same data. And so user roles is just, we need to stick it in a read model, which means that the user profile could still have access to those user roles. It just means you don't change them there. Or we just have a completely read-only object that is not an aggregate. That's basically a value object that you just read and find out and associate with whoever the logged in user and however we track that. And so this kind of discovery of your aggregate boundaries is one of the things that you can imagine happening quite often. And that's why, again, don't name your aggregates up front.
Pants 1, pants 2, pants 3.
Yeah, just call it pants. Pants, applesauce. So Sweetie asks, is there a possibility the whole process could be in a generic subdomain? Yeah, I mean, I kind of think authorization kinds of stuff is generally generic, and how you get people to change stuff is somewhat generic. Absolutely. Would it be something we'd pull in from some third party? Maybe. Probably not right away, but it certainly could be considered a generic subdomain because it's not a core part of the application, right? So for those of you who don't know what generic subdomain is, it's like it's some part of you need it, but is it something that like differentiates you from everybody else? It's like, no, we're not going to be differentiated by how we invite people and change their roles, but we need it. What else do we want to say?
I am running out of things to say regarding this board.
Okay,
Um,
that's good. That means we're
oh, we did have that purple sticky saying
yeah,
ensure invite not expired.
yeah, yeah. So one of the things we're trying to figure out is sort of prerequisite. So the aggregates job is to change data, but make sure that it's okay to change the data. So things like, well, if we sent out an invite and an accept came in, was that invite still valid? Did it not expire? And we have a separate policy that can handle that. I think we had that up here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We did.
So, yep, right here. Invites expire after.
Oh, right. Yeah, the little clock symbol.
Yep. Yep. And so there are things that are time based or generally time based of some sort, either timeouts or regular events or some period of time, or whatever day of week it is, that kind of thing. So Sweetie asks, is the discovery of non-core subdomains something that usually occasionally happens during events? I would think it's very common. You're going to come up with all sorts of things that are required. You're not initially worried about um, which subdomain it is. You probably won't dive too deeply into that, depending on sort of how well known the other, like a supporting subdomain, you're probably going to talk in some detail about. And if it's a generic one, you're just going to say, yeah, we're going to use, this third-party authorization service for that, or we're going to use this other service for that here, and we don't need to know much more about it. One thing we didn't do here, because we were sort of already kind of within a really bounded context, is when you have a lot of these events and you start separating them, you start seeing the bounded contexts. You start saying, this stuff is about shipping. This stuff is about
Billing.
billing. This stuff is about our customers. This stuff is about the warehouse in terms of loading the warehouse versus shipping, right? There's actually two sides to the warehouse: bring stuff in and ship stuff out, and those are two separate bounded contexts. So when you have a lot of those events, and that's when we're talking about, you've got dozens, if not hundreds, of these things, then you start dividing things into bounded contexts, and then you probably will see how these things then talk to each other. How does shipping know how to do it? Well, the order system said the payment was okay, so go ahead and ship it. How do we know how to display the read model for this product to know if it's in stock? Well, the warehouse said, hey, we just loaded a pallet of these things and they're ready to ship.
And we have email service as an external service, but I realized we didn't really put in the concept of using a third-party authorization service.
Right. And so, in fact, we still will probably use a third-party authorization service because I don't want to write one. But in terms of the role change invites, I think that's more supporting. We're going to use a
Right.
generic authorization, but yeah.
Exactly. I just meant we didn't have a
We
whatever
didn't have
color sticky
got
that
it.
is.
Right. We didn't have a lavender sticky for it.
Lavender, yeah.
Is that lavender? I don't know. I'm not good with color names. And Java Grant says, Spring authorization service. Like, no, I don't want to run my own server. Pay somebody to do the authentication. I promised myself I will never handle usernames and passwords again as long as I live. I will happily farm that out to somebody else. I think that's it.
Yeah. So what's next? We figure out what we're going to do first. What time is it?
Yes.
Oh, it's 4.
It's 3, so we got half an hour left.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, like, this process, yes, it's meant for more complex systems, but even this, what seemed
Absurdly
straightforward,
simple.
I won't use the word simple, straightforward, it was still, like, complex enough, that it was, I think it was definitely worth it. Oh God, not Facebook logins. No, sorry. And I hate magic links, so we're not using magic links. Well, that's up to Mike. He's the product owner, as it were. But yeah,
Magic login links. I actually don't know what they are. I probably used them, but I don't know the
I'm sure
term.
you've used them. Basically, you type your email address and you hit sign in, and then it sends you an email with a link that then logs you in, and no password is needed. And I
Got it.
dislike that because when I'm on mobile, it's switching apps, and then I end up not where I want to be because I'm in a different browser. On web, on desktop, it's not as bad, but I'm glad you were joking, OA, about the Facebook logins. I will never use Facebook as long as I live, but I've been banned, so that's not a problem. I just want to say Java Grant. Yes, thank you. Yeah, love our community. So we've got our stories, but before we want to do that, do we want to show the repository of our code, or do we want to talk about how we're going to approach the stories?
We can show the repository.
Okay.
I mean, just IntelliJ. Do you want me to share screen, or do you want to do it?
I'll go ahead, and your screen is not shared.
Okay. So, did you want to look from the IntelliJ perspective?
Yeah.
Okay.
And why don't you zoom in, since we're...
Oh, right. Now, 1 second.
So Lex was asked, what did I do to get banned on Facebook? Honestly, I don't know. I just found one day, not that I was accessing it much, but I found one day I was just banned. Wouldn't let me log in.
Wow.
I wish there was a great story behind it, but unfortunately there's not. That's one of those things where they don't tell you anything. And I could appeal it, but I really don't care.
What do y'all think? 125 or 150? That's 150. That's 125. I can't see the chat.
I'd probably say 150. We can always drop it down if once we get more into coding.
Okay. I think that's where I left off. 150.
Awesome.
I really need to assign a shortcut for this one.
There we go.
There we go.
Why don't you open up the source tree a bit more in the project window? Yeah, you can just hit the expand all. I know it always expands all the other things. I wish it had a button for, like, no, just expand.
Expand what I like.
Everything under SRC. I actually have a shortcut for that I assigned, where if I'm on SRC, I can basically just say expand everything under here.
You would think that right click would have an expand from here.
You would think.
Yeah.
But don't worry about it.
Okay.
So, like all good XPers, we created the project and deployed it. So we have basically a walking skeleton. So nothing very complex here. Just an out of the box Spring Boot 3.2 app with good old test containers and Postgres and all the goodies. But we fully deployed it with its own URL, its own domain name.
Yep. Let me grab that.
Yep.
I still have that up.
because we very much believe in continuous deployment.
So it's the URL name we were able to get was song thematic, as in schematic. And we're deploying it using, how do you pronounce
Yes.
it?
So Koyeb is how I'm pronouncing
Koyeb.
it.
Koyeb.
I don't know what it means. And I heard about this one actually on one of Deshaun's Java Grunt streams. What's nice about it is it has like a sufficient enough free tier that we could get away with deploying this and probably even get some functionality in there before we perhaps run out of resources. Although I think for this one, it might be good enough. And they just, by the way, the Java 21 build pack is now available, so we're all good. Yes, Thomas introduced us to that. So, because they didn't have Java, they were having some issues, and so they didn't support the Java 21 build pack, but now they do, and so we're all set. And so it's set up. We basically do a commit and push. When GitHub gets it, it will deploy. Koyeb will pick it up and deploy it. And so now that we have that, now we can be confident. And we might want to do some additional gates in our continuous integration where we might want to build it on GitHub, and if the test pass, then we move it on to the next step. But we're going to be good TDDers and not even commit unless the test pass. Sorry, not push. We'll commit, but we won't push.
So from I forget, this walking skeleton come from the XP world?
That's what it feels like for me. I don't know if it was explicitly that. I just feel it's, since XP is all about continuous delivery, I feel like walking skeleton, if it's not officially a part of it, it's unofficially a part of it.
So yeah, so we've got code in GitHub that Koyeb keeps an eye on. When we push, it builds and then publishes to the website.
Yep.
Doesn't do much, just says coming soon.
That's enough.
That's all you need to do, right?
That's all. Yep. Yeah. And so this was, one of the things this does is it took more than a few minutes to do, because we had to, hook up the domain, we had to register accounts, we had to hook up the repository, and all these things are you kind of want to do in advance when you have the simplest possible thing, because then, like, if we couldn't give it some static HTML and that didn't work, then we got to figure that out. But now we know, right? We can return a string, and here's some HTML, so we know that works. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Gradle versus Maven?
Because Maven is better. That's it. Maven's better.
Declared.
Maven's better. Gradle is, for me, has too much capability. I want my tools to be useful but simple. I really like XML. Call me old, but I like XML because it tells you when it's wrong. And there are lots of tools and plugins that do what I need. Yeah, okay, Boomer. Thank you. My son says that all the time. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And with Gradle, you're basically writing code, even though it doesn't look like you're writing code. You're writing code, and I like autocomplete. I like knowing exactly what's expected. And with XML, because there's a schema behind it, it can tell me what's missing and what I need. With Gradle, if you're using Groovy, then you have kind of no idea what's possible. With Kotlin, it's better because it's now typed, but now you are coupled to Kotlin, which has its own issues. So Gradle has its place, but I'm a Maven guy.
It's kind of a starting from the simplest thing that'll work approach.
Yeah.
Right, which is another.
I mean, some might say Gradle is simpler, but like, depends on what you mean by simple. XML looks more complicated because it's very verbose. But come on, we're programming in Java, right? We like verbosity. But I find the support, especially because even though the support for Gradle inside of something like IntelliJ is much better than it was, it feels like it's always going to be better with Maven because it's easier for tools to process. And so therefore, since I live in IntelliJ, except for email, hopefully they will never add email. Right? That's the ultimate goal of any tool. It adds email, it's dead. I live in it, and so I want Maven as much as possible. Anything else we want to say about the project? Not much else to say here.
I think so. The tests, I don't think they're pretty. Yeah, just the default.
So I think what will take the last 20 minutes or so is to figure out what's our next step.
Sounds good. Should we go over to our friend the Miro board?
Yeah.
One thing we didn't do is when we get to the end, we didn't go back and say, hey, are all these stories still valid?
Oh, yeah.
Um,
And we do have some stories that are untagged, so we didn't even evaluate them yet, but those are probably more future.
Yeah, we probably should move these over to the future stories pile.
Yeah, let's do that.
The freezer.
I was working with someone, and they were using Pivotal Tracker, and I'm like, wow, Pivotal Tracker. That's awesome. I didn't think that thing was still around, but apparently it is. Hey, Danny Roos. Yes, actually, we're simulcasting to both Twitch and YouTube. So once it's done, the YouTube video will be right there. So that's basically the advantage of using StreamYard. Besides making it easy for guests, it also makes it easy to simulcast. And Twitch changed their affiliate agreement, so now they're okay with this. So, what should we work on first?
Good question. I know the product owner should know this, but
well,
I'm thinking, what's the
not
simplest?
necessarily.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely want to channel XP, and what's the simplest next step?
Right.
Right. Is it searching or adding?
So this is frequently the question that I encounter is, do you basically work on viewing the stuff or adding, creating the stuff? And I always look at it from, what do I do when I'm doing TDD is basically, how do I verify if I start with create, how do I verify it worked? Whereas if you start with the searching, how you see it, how you know it worked is because you can see it. So I'm always thinking about, how do I know that it's doing what I need to do? And so I generally start with the viewing query side rather than the command creation side.
And I presume we'll start with a visitor because that way we don't need logins or any of that.
That would certainly be the easier place to start, yes.
I'll give it 2 diamonds just to say, hey, we're starting here. I am convinced. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I could counter that proposal, but I think that's pretty much. Yeah, I'm with you. I agree. So we'd have to, well, I imagine we want to do as much under the skin as we can,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not worry about what the UI looks like for this.
So if we think about, what would our acceptance be? Like, what do we want to see? What functionality as a visitor would we want to see? And not worrying about how it's formatted or anything like that.
Right. Well, assuming we have, let's just say, 2 songs, each with their own tag, which is different. Then when we want to see a song for one of those tags, we get that song back.
So we could start with something even simpler,
Great.
which is, and this is sort of the 0, 1 many idea. What if they type in a theme that doesn't exist? What happens?
That's good.
Because it's really easy to display nothing.
Yep.
Right? We couldn't find it. But hey, what that does is, even though we're not creating anything, what I'm hearing is we got to start with typing in and posting some request. And so that sounds like work. And so if we can simplify the result, that would get us that first step. And then we can say, okay, now the theme is found, and here's a song with that theme.
Did you want to do it under the skin layer or actually from?
So I like to start. I don't think I want to write an HTML based test, but I would want to write an MVC level test. In other words, a test that is testing what URL are we hitting, what do we get back from that. But we're not going to test like the contents of the HTML or anything like that. We could add that on later, but right now it would be more basically outside in. Right? Start at what's the edge? The edge is hitting a URL. What is that URL going to be? I don't know. Maybe it's the homepage, and maybe it just says type your theme. And then what do we expect? Is we expect some HTML, basically a 200 status. And then the next step is, okay, we posted the form. What's the contents of the form? Well, it's the theme. What do we expect back? Some page. All right. So that way we get how does the browser interact with it? And then we can dive in deeper with the details of what does the form look like? What does search results look like? Things like that. And so EGS, so if we don't, the stuff we're searching for, yes. So generally when I start with queries, I start with hard-coded data. And then later on, we will then have the behavioral commands that will allow us to add those. And then we will be able to write tests for that because we will already have seen the hard-coded data. And now we'll basically want to see that it's going to reflect back the data that we added as opposed to the hard-coded data. It is easy to display nothing. Just display a blank screen. That's fine. I'm not going to ship it. That's fine. So not sure where you want to put this. Did you want to create an issue for this where we can sort of do the kind of given when then idea?
Yeah, let me grab. Thought I had it at my fingertips. Oh, yeah, it's right here. I just didn't have it on the right monitor. So we'll create issues for.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different places and ways we could do this.
Right.
But we're doing issues because Mike wanted to try it out. So
yeah. I mean, I've done, obviously many Trello and other kinds of different lean approaches.
Pivotal tracker.
Pivotal tracker. Yeah, I just wanted to see what it was like to use issues within GitHub for tracking. Maybe tracking is not the right word, but for noting, like sticky notes.
Yeah. Well,
basically having them. Jira, no. Hard no.
Oops. Oops, sorry, I better show this one. Yes.
Oh.
Yes, you should run away.
Yeah, definitely run away.
You've been warned.
I've proudly gotten at least 2 teams to dump Jira and just do stickies on the wall.
If you're co-located,
yes, I mean, this is obviously when you're co-located teams.
So Suiji asks about HTMX. We have talked about that, and where appropriate, we will likely use it. Yes.
Yeah. And that's in the roadmap.
That it's in the roadmap.
Okay.
It's in our heads. It's one of those things like we're not going to forget about that. So there's no, it's why write it down if we're never going to forget about it? It'll be clear when we need it or want it. So even writing it down is not necessary. And that's the problem with your huge backlogs. It's like, of course we're going to do that.
I'm looking at all the comments.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is going to be, I brought up the wrong event storming. What? This one. Nope, this one. Might as well just name it the same way.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a little bit freaking verbose, but at least it gets the idea out. Any thoughts on making it a little bit better, or it doesn't matter?
Perfect.
So any thoughts on how to do labels with this? What are our options for the existing ones?
I mean, technically it's an enhancement. I tend not to use labels until I have enough where I can't keep track
Well, you have
of things.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, you wanted to do given when then, didn't you?
Up to you. You might want to zoom in the browser to make it a little bit more readable.
Oh yeah, thanks. Good to get those reminders. I must be tired. I'm drawing a blank here.
I think we can just say, given an empty song database. And again, here, I'm not sure what our ubiquitous language is, but that's what I'm using for now. When visitor enters a theme, or submits a theme search, perhaps is more precise. What do we call it? We actually call it a query.
Yeah, let's
again, here's our ubiquitous language again. What do we call it?
Oh, you got it on your screen?
Yeah. So we got.
Well, we're sharing my screen right now, I think.
We're sharing our screen, but I'll look at the.
I can move over to it.
Yeah, so we basically just had search, but I don't think we had.
Well, what about visitor searches for a theme?
Yeah. Did you want simpler? All right, and then what do they get?
Thoughts?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry, I shouldn't look at comments.
Hey, that's why we're streaming. If you're not going to look at comments, what's the point?
Yeah, true. Easy to get distracted by them, though. Okay, so I'm saying good enough, but
I think that's good enough.
Cool. We got our first thing to do. the comment.
Yeah, you don't have to add a comment. So this is where you can start having a little bit of a conversation, either
Oh, I
with
see.
yourself or with other people.
Got it.
I will have frequent conversations with myself. Oh, don't forget X.
You're publicly admitting that, huh? Okay.
It's on my repo. I'm not saying
No, I
anything
know.
people can't find. As long as I don't call myself names, then I'm good.
Yeah, there you go. You stupid idiot. What were you thinking? Okay.
Oops. Story points. Yeah, how many story
Oh
points?
my
It's
God.
always one. How many story points is it? It's always one.
Yeah.
Always one.
You guys are just triggering all these rants that I'm holding back from here. We don't story point bugs. Oy.
So I think our next step is we can start writing a test.
Okay. Times like this, when you have too many windows open. I'm just going to do it the old school way. Here we go. Please navigate.
Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Yes, I guess I'm navigator. All right. So let's create a new test class. We'll just put it in the main. I guess we could do a little, so not there, but in our test directory. Yeah. So let's go ahead and you can right click and create a new Java class. Yep. What was the
You want me to pull that forward?
let's just call it theme search test. Is it a theme search or a song search?
I think it's a song search.
Okay, song search
But
test.
it's interesting.
Because you're searching by theme, but what are you searching for? Are songs.
So if you read that, would you think it meant you were searching for themes or searching for songs? Versus song search, theme test, song search.
I think it's, how about song search by theme test?
Even better, because you know,
Now you
there'll
know.
probably be a point where we want to search.
We do have
first.
features for searching by other things, yes.
Right, yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Cool, created.
All right. So let's start writing our first. So what we want to do, we don't necessarily have to start from the outside. I'm not sure if we want to start from all the way to the outside, which would be at the controller level, or if we want to start subcutaneous, like you were saying.
I would tend to go for subcutaneous, but I'm open to other approaches if you want to go farther out. Subcutaneous, is there much we would test? I guess we'll find out if we do it.
So the only potential problem for subcutaneous test first is you might not have your method signatures set up in a way that's convenient for the caller. That's the only, like, because we may write the test where it's like, here's a string that's a theme, or here's some other thing, and it might actually require some other attributes.
Good point.
On the flip side, we could just say, we'll figure it out and refactor our way there. So let's start here, see what that feels like. So let's write a test. Let's create a new test.
I have to change this.
You can keep the throws exception in there. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
But now you got two ats.
Yeah, I know.
So one thing you can do is you can use the alt insert to generate the test instead of the post live template.
Alt insert?
Yep.
Oh, that was control insert.
That was control.
I want alt.
And you can just say, just hit enter for test method. Gnit 5.
And it includes exception.
That's weird. So it also put in the public, which is odd. I wonder if it's using a different template. Let's not worry about that.
Okay.
So what does this test do? What did we say in our story? So I think we can just say search for theme that does not exist.
Is that what you said?
Yeah. Returns no results. Sure. The search for might be redundant based on the class name, but I think we're okay. We don't need to bike shed that just yet. So I like to sort of sketch out what are we going to assert. So we're basically saying no results. So probably it's going to return some kind of list of something is my guess. So we're probably going to assert that some list doesn't exist. So we need the thing we're searching against.
Assert that the list doesn't exist, or assert that the list is empty?
Sorry, the list is empty.
Okay.
That the list has no contents. So let's create a class. What are we going to call it? We'll call it Song Searcher. And then let's go ahead and new that up, and may as well create it at this point, unless the var works. Oh, the var will work. All right.
It did.
Yeah, nice.
Sweet. No.
And well, it did what we wanted to do. Now we can go ahead and create it.
Alt enter? No.
Should be Alt enter.
Oh, I didn't press Alt enter. That's why.
So yeah, let's go ahead and create the class.
Not in test.
Not in test. I wish.
Why do they always?
Because you're in the test directory.
I know.
So they assume you want to do that, even though that's not the way we end up doing it.
That should be configurable.
Yes, that would be nice. And so let's skip a line because we want to say song searcher, and we'll just say dot theme search, or just theme, or how about by theme? And let's put in double quotes, pick a theme that we won't find, like applesauce. All right, let's go create that method. Undo that, because one thing we forgot to do was actually assign the results.
Assign it, because I know we have. Where were we? Here? Yeah.
So let's assign that. Let's say our expectations is going to be that it's going to return a list of string for now. Var isn't going to work because the method doesn't exist, so it doesn't know what to do. And we can say found songs. And not sure why list isn't importing for you.
That's weird.
It is the only option. You might not have an automatically. So there's a setting automatically import unambiguous imports on the fly, which is in settings. So search for unambiguous. Yeah. So check that. It's occasionally annoying, but most of the time it does what you want.
Pardon me, I want to just redo that. Okay, thanks. There's the OK button. Now create.
Now create, yes, because now it'll know what
do.
The return type will be. We could probably change applesauce as the variable name though. And we should just call it theme.
Whoop.
Whoop. That's not what you want. There you go. All right. Do we want to split our panes now since we're going back and forth now?
Yeah, it's a good time to do that.
Yeah.
There's no split and move left?
No, there's not.
Really?
Yeah.
That is so weird. Okay, so then I'll do this one.
Yeah.
Split, right. Okay.
So RS Paul asks a good question. Turning a list of strings rather than song objects. This is a case of I don't know what a song object looks like. And for me, we could guess what that is, but since we're returning what's going to be an empty list, it really doesn't matter. And so we're doing basically the simplest thing that we can get away with that starts getting us towards what we want. If we introduced a song object here, it would actually not help us much with what this test's purpose is, which is given a search theme, given a theme for a search, we get no results. So anything more than a string to me is more work than I need to do. So that's my thought behind that. And pretty much exactly what Suiji says, like start with primitives until you know what you need, because it's going to be relatively easy to create a song object once we have a better idea of what that looks like.
Yeah, well, the TDD process will lead us down that path.
Yeah. So even it's likely when we get to even future tests, we're probably just going to start with strings. And then we'll get to stories that talk about, well, what is a song? What do we want to display? And we'll have to figure that out. But then we will figure it out once we know more about what the application is. So this is a case of generally, can I defer this decision when I will know more? And this is a case where I think we can. And like everything else, it's always trade-offs.
Is this screen res or the zoom a bit too much for folks, or is it okay?
Yeah, so let us know in chat if the zoom font size, if the font size is good. There is another option. You could go top bottom.
That's true.
Which is what I sometimes will do on stream. So you can change splitter orientation.
Got it.
Yeah. And so Suiji mentions even the theme itself that we search for might be a value object, but we don't know yet.
Yep.
I'm very anti-commitment. I don't like to commit. I like to keep my options open.
What is it? It's make the decision at the last responsible moment.
At the last responsible moment. Yes.
Yeah.
Still, everybody's definition of responsible is different.
Right. Right now, it feels like we're not that responsible.
Yeah. So I just want to time note, we were scheduled to stop here. I am able to go for another 10 minutes or so.
I can.
So if you're okay, then that's our.
Do folks that tune into your stream in general, like block out the time and they're like, oh, bummer, you're going extra and I can't watch. I guess they could watch the stream afterwards or the YouTube recording.
It's more about the starting time, and yeah, they can always, if it goes longer, then they'll miss it, and they can watch the recording. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. I'm okay with 10 more minutes.
We're not a TV show where we have to end our show by a certain time. Yeah.
And now for a commercial.
Yeah, no commercial breaks. Yeah, unfortunately for some folks, yeah, like Luigi, it's like it's already really late there, so another 10 minutes isn't going to matter. All right. We'd like to make this test fail, but we don't have an assertion, so let's do that. So let's assert that found songs is empty. It helps if you type the as a method first. So if you do open close paren and pass in, and now the autocomplete is going to be much better.
Okay.
Or the auto import, sorry.
Like that?
Yeah. So you'll need to now import assert that.
Oh, right.
Because if you don't type anything as a parameter, it's going to try to import other classes, and we'll fix that up in some later time. But now we've got the right import.
Got it.
So now let's put that dot on a new line. And we can just say is empty. All right. We can't run this yet because it doesn't compile. So let's go and on the bottom, line 6.5, let's return null. And for tests, we haven't set up anything yet. So let's just run this class and we'll do other stuff around unit tests later. Yeah, run it. And we expect it to fail because null is not allowed.
Go boom.
Yeah, expected actual to not be null. Right. All right. Let's go return an empty list at line 7. So you can do collections.emptylist.
Run the test.
And run the tests. Now they should pass. Excellent.
Yay.
Sure. Let's do a commit since we've added stuff. So unlike other situations, we probably want to be a little bit more careful about that. Also, we can go, we'll do it in a separate commit. We can now go back to the POM and change it to Java 21. But for now, let's add this.
Okay. Text for the commitment you?
Oh, right. Since I'm navigating, I'll do that. Added first test for searching for songs by theme.
Cool.
Yep.
Commit, but not commit and push, right?
Right. I mean, you could push, but it wouldn't do anything useful. Let's change a couple of things because it's going to run code now. So there's the gear in the lower right corner of, so where it says commit and commit push, those two buttons.
Oh, here. Gotcha.
Click that gear. Uncheck the analyze code because we don't care. Optimize imports. And that's all fine. Just click out of it. There's no close button.
Oh, weird. No.
Yeah, it is weird. It's like, why isn't there a close button or done or save? But there isn't. All right, let's figure out what so that's our 0 case.
Did you want to do the POM or we'll do the?
Oh yeah, let's do that so we won't forget about it. So let's go into the POM file. And let's find it. It's probably at the top for the Java version.
That was a bad thing to check for. Version.
Just scroll down. It's not going to be very far. There it is. Line 17. Let's change that to 21.
Dot version.
And let's do a commit. Oh wait, let's wait until everything reloads. So right, cool. Yeah, and let's do a commit.
That good?
That's perfect.
Okay. Commit.
Yeah, I'm a little less pedantic about the code analysis stuff. I like my green check marks too, but it always annoys me when I'm not ready for that level of green. Okay, so let's we can close the POM file. Let's go back to the test on the top. So let's see. Was that our story? What was our story? And now I'm forgetting what our story was.
Oh, give me a second. Where was that? There.
Hey, we're done with the story.
Woohoo.
Well, so we're done with the subcutaneous version of
Right.
of the story. So we could either extend this story to say one song matches the theme. So basically sort of go breadth on the class, the song searcher class. The other option is to sort of go sort of vertically and move outside and say, well, what is this going to look like from the web point of view?
I guess depends what we were talking about stopping in 5 minutes. So which one's more likely to be able to pull it off in 5 minutes? I'm leaning towards the width. It's probably faster.
I actually kind of want to leave a breadcrumb for next time.
Okay, cool.
So
Let's do that.
So let's go and create a class for that represents our controller. So let's go write a new test, and that will be our we'll just call it song themes MVC test for now.
Okay.
Yep. And let's add an annotation on top of 3. So 2.5. It's going to be at web MVC test. So uppercase W, because we're in Java, that one. And then let's create a test method.
I forget. Whoops.
Alt insert.
That's what I got.
Test method.
Why does it keep asking for the framework?
Because an indirect dependency has JUnit 4, which I believe is test container's fault. There's a way to exclude that. We can fiddle with that.
Okay.
So we'll sort of back ourselves out to the GET request. So we'll start basically with the post request. So we'll say post to search endpoint redirects. To result. No, that's actually fine. We don't care what it redirects to. All right. And in here, we're going to do, we need to pull it in our mock MVC. So go up to 7.5. And so mock MVC is a class that we want to declare here. Yep. And we want a variable for that. No,
Does that work?
No, just space. This will be our field.
Name?
So just mock MVC.
Got it.
And put a semicolon there and put an annotation above that. So 8.5 at auto wired. Yep. And stick in a space above 10.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. So 16, we're going to do mock MVC dot post. Sorry, dot perform. I forget post is the static method. So perform Post is a method, so do post open close paren, lowercase p. It's going to be a statically imported method. Inside the post, we're going to put a string. So what's our URL? Is it going to be just /search? Sure, why not?
Sure.
So /search. Actually, let's do /theme-search. I know that might be more than we needed here, but why not? And you'll need to import that post method as a static import that we're going to have to do. And that's the one. And then at the end there on a new line, we can say dot and expect. And what we want there is another statically imported method, status. So do status open close paren. And then import that. Yep. The first one there. And after the close paren on status, so after that paren, dot, use 300 redirection, that one. And then put a semicolon at the end. There's our test. So this is basically saying when we do a post to this URL, we expect it to redirect us because it's going to redirect us to the page that has the results. If we run this or run it and we expect it to fail, most likely with a 404 because that endpoint doesn't exist. And that would be a perfect stopping point.
And a good breadcrumb.
That's why it's a good stopping point. Perfect. Yes, we got a 404. So somewhere in there was 404. Yep. We got a client error, which is a 404 instead of the redirection that we wanted. Excellent. So test failed as expected. All right.
Commit?
I'm fine with committing a failing test.
Because we're not pushing.
Because we're not pushing. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So let's commit.
Well, you tell me what you want to write.
Failing test for theme search endpoint.
Love it.
Perfect. Excellent.
Awesome.
All right. So how'd that feel?
That was good.
Yeah.
People were quiet while we were coding, not much new comments.
So our next scheduled time is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific time.
Yep.
So join us for that for episode 2. As always, hit us up on the Discord if you have any questions. Would very much appreciate sharing our stream, sharing the links would be appreciated. Otherwise, great. Thanks for joining us. And we will see you tomorrow for episode 2. Our next one after that is planned for Thursday. And then after that, we'll figure out what's after that. So have a good rest of your day or evening, and we will see you next time.
Take care.